So all the focus groups. Welcome to Progressive Soup. So all the focus groups after the Democratic Party debate with the Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley, Lincoln Chafee, and Jim Webb, all the focus groups and all the online polling indicated that Bernie Sanders did real well in the debate, and in fact won the debate and made the strongest points for himself. And then the next morning in the Washington Post and the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and all the other corporate media talked about how Hillary Clinton hit a home run. She knocked it out of the park. She guaranteed herself the candidacy. And so this clash of two different perceptions of the debate and who made what points and who talked to their points the best is interesting to watch. But again, welcome to Progressive Soup. I've got two gentlemen with me that are Bernie Sanders supporters, as am I. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the debate and about Bernie Sanders and as a candidate. And start us off, Joe.
Well, you're looking at the show and you're saying to yourself, how are they going to perceive this? There's a tremendous amount of subjectivity in who wins and who loses and who doesn't look too good. Now, Lincoln Chafee, he didn't handle his questions very well. Kind of put him a bit behind the 8-bit ball.
Yeah, everybody kind of agrees that he did very poorly.
Jim was kind of stiff, and he seemed to be struggling for attention. Mm-hmm. And all that seemed to revolve around O'Malley and Sanders and Clinton. But you got to keep in mind that despite who wins or who loses in our perception of the event, there are certain elements in the entire process that rule. Mm-hmm. Rule, and they will pose the rationale for who's on top and who's on the bottom, because who's on the top and who's on the bottom is something that pertains to their interest and their interest alone, which may not necessarily be in the best interests of the American people.
What's your take on the debate, John?
Well, Joe's getting to something that reporters and the scribbling class, as I call them, they don't do anything that will jeopardize their access. And they will go with the guy that's probably made the deal with the devil with them to provide continued access if and after they're elected. And so that's why the scribblers, the reporters and political pundits, they have an agenda that is often at cross purposes with the agenda of the American public.
Yeah, somewhat self-serving. It sounds
very self-serving.
Sounds what I'm hearing, that they want to be able to say to whichever the candidate is that ends up being the candidate, hey, remember what I said about you during the debate or after the debate, so keep me in mind when you've got your interviews to do.
It's all about access.
They'll start on the most superficial of factors, appearance. Mm-hmm. Hillary looked presidential. Whatever presidential looks like. O'Malley, he was pretty good looking. That seems like a possible presidential attribute. Mm-hmm. Sanders, well, I don't know. Didn't seem to fall into that sense of perception.
Yeah, but he also looks like the crazy professor or teacher that somebody had at some point in their life that changed their lives that they will remember forever. The high school social studies teacher that you always remembered. That's Bernie.
Or somebody's benevolent grandfather that they look to for being a sound source of advice and.
I think they try to pull that same stunt on Truman. Mm-hmm. But I think the American people were wise enough to get past that. All right? now, whether or not
the one where Dewey won by a landslide? Is that the...
Yeah, Dewey defeats Truman, the great
right, that
great
story.
headline in national papers.
Yeah. Well, that scenario could conceivably be repeated if the American people are in tune to which candidate is truly a candidate of the people.
Well, it seems like they are so far, because the polling on the early primary states, at least the first two primary states, is very favorable for Bernie Sanders. He came from behind and looks very strong against Hillary Clinton.
He's within the margin of error in both of them.
Yeah. The one he's a little bit ahead, and one he's a little bit behind, but well within the margin of error on both of them. So,
sometimes you have to look at what the other camp is saying, what they're thinking. It's just so you can get a much broader look of what the situation really is.
Interesting point. Yeah.
You mean within the party or across parties?
Sometimes Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh. He's fascinated by the amount of money that Bernie Williams.
Sanders, yeah.
Williams is the ball player,
he's the
guitar player. Yeah, that's what happens.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's for Bernie Sanders.
More than
if he's not, he should be. Anyway, getting back to Bernie Sanders, back to Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh is taken by the fact that Bernie Sanders is pulling in a significant amount of money, and he's pulling it in from a lot of donors.
And little bitty donations.
Yeah, little bitty donations. But the significant
$25,
the significant part is a lot of donors, because those lot of donors could turn into a lot to voters at some point.
People put a little money into something, especially people that aren't real rich.
Okay, and also, Rush says something to the effect that, Hillary, she may be the chosen among the Democratic committee, and they may want their girl in there. They may want their person in there. They may want Hillary in there. A lot of the women in the DNC were disappointed when Hillary came second to Barack Obama. They certainly don't want Hillary to come second now to old man Bernie Sanders. So there's a lot of things in the background that's not very apparent to us, and there's a lot of ways that things are interpreted. There's a lot of spins that are put on in various situations to persuade the American voters in one direction over another. And I tell friends of mine, listen, if the name is very familiar to you, and if you see a lot of advertisements for this particular person, that means there's a lot of money behind that particular person. And if there's a lot of money behind that particular person, it's the people that are giving that money, all right, that want that particular person to be operating in their interest. Okay, so familiarize yourself, all right, with those people that are not getting the same kind of publicity, because it's conceivable, okay, that they may be the people that will be truly representing you. David.
Bernie spent a lot of time in the debate talking about his time with the Veteran Affairs Committee, and cleaning up would have been about a decade long. Well, the length of from the beginning of the Iraqi conflict, and I'm sure well before that, because veterans have never gotten a fair shake through any time in American history, except for during the World War II, where very early on in the conflict, a lot of things were put into place waiting for veterans to come home, not realizing, of course, how long the war would go. But Bernie talked at length about the Veterans Affairs Committee and how he came in as the chair in a very, very difficult time, a decade long at least, scandal in place, and things he did to help correct that situation. Now, John is a veteran from Vietnam, and would you like to speak from a veteran's perspective about Bernie and his
well,
work?
There was one bill. I mean, he's put his footprint on a lot of veterans legislation, but the one that really stands out is the one that he crafted in 2014 with John McCain,
Another
the other side of the aisle. Mm-hmm. And everybody, again, the political pundit class has said that, they're never going to be able to talk to each other again. It's all rancor. They're not going to get anything done. But here are two guys that were philosophically and politically on really opposite sides of the fence, mm-hmm. except for one thing, doing the right thing for vets, crafted a piece of legislation that was a major step toward eliminating the waiting times for vets, where they returning vets from the Middle East, where they had to wait 6 and 8 months for non-critical medical attention and PTSD counseling, all of the things that the returning vets are experiencing. And without going into detail about it, a couple of the ideas were, if a vet lives 40 miles or more from a veterans facility, a veterans hospital facility, he or she can go to a community hospital and it'll be billed to the VA. It ultimately will be paid for by the taxpayers in that column mm-hmm. of the ledger, but guess what? The guys or the woman who's needs the attention is going to get the attention a whole lot sooner. It goes much. It's a much broader bill than that, but that's an example of.
That's a very important point, because
breaking the backlog.
A lot of veterans do live a long way
yep.
from the nearest veterans hospital, yep. and there was talk probably for decades now about how they should be allowed to go somewhere that's closer. Well, maybe it's not a hospital that's specifically geared towards veterans issues, towards
right.
veterans injuries. Both.
Guess what? They'll learn fast.
Exactly.
If they have to.
Medicine is medicine is medicine, mm-hmm. and being able to go someplace much closer is an mm-hmm. important step in the right direction for veteran care.
Sure. Well, American citizens, that's what we are. Mm-hmm. Veterans are American citizens.
Absolutely.
Now, what we have to understand is that before a veteran becomes a veteran's an American citizen. Mm-hmm. And a veteran will become a veteran when we find ourselves in a situation of war. Now, the politicians, they'll talk about whether or not a particular candidate voted for this military engagement or did not vote for that military engagement. But you have to keep in mind, reluctance to vote for a military engagement means that the politician may have the American citizens' welfare in the back of his or her mind.
That may be the focus of their vote, certainly.
Right. Now, Bernie Sanders admitted that he was a conscientious objector during Vietnam. There were a number of American citizens that honestly believed that the Vietnam War was not a just war. We shouldn't have been engaged in that. Some of them ran to Canada. Others managed to provide deferments for themselves. Mm-hmm. So others were able to get were able to become
the conscientious objector.
Yeah, right.
That's what I went for, but my draft number came out to be like 365 at a time when they were only drafting up to like number 40.
Conscientious objectors. Now I got to jump in here because conscientious objectors. When I was drafted in the pre-lottery draft in August of 1966. Mm-hmm. I could have enlisted as a conscientious objector after being drafted, and I would have become a medic. I'd still be in combat, mm-hmm. but I wouldn't have to take up arms against anybody. A conscientious objector doesn't get you out of serving in the military. That's one of the misconceptions about conscientious objector status. There are a whole lot of deferments, but that one is not a deferment. That's a choice that you could make, but it wouldn't get you out of service.
I think it was, I know for a fact now, it was a student deferment that I had gotten initially. That got me through college. Then I was able to get a teaching deferment.
Yes.
That was able to prolong the process. But eventually, even that expired. I was called up. I remember going to Fort Hamilton in Brooklyn. Had my physical, and it looked as though it was just a matter of time before I'd probably be shipped off to Vietnam. Yep. The only thing that changed that course of events is that apparently the headmaster of the school that I was teaching at was special education in those days. It was very new. Not too much was known about it. I don't know what he wrote, but apparently he convinced the draft board to extend my deferment.
Interesting.
Yeah, and eventually what happened, we went from draft to lottery. Right. And then after that, I guess you just kind of outgrow it. But then again, some of my friends were coming back from Vietnam. Some of them had some serious drug problems. One guy in particular, his teeth, he lost his teeth. The shock, I suppose it is pretty shocking when you stuck someplace and there's bombs going off all around you, and maybe even body parts that you have to encounter. What people don't understand, what they can't appreciate, okay, is the human devastation, which is the byproduct of war. You don't win a war. You're always defeated. All right? The loser may be defeated more so than the winner, but the winner is also defeated. It's called a Pyrrhic victory. Okay?
Everybody's damaged.
Everybody is damaged. I mean, basic training, you've got to be desensitized enough to be able to kill another human being. All right? Don't tell me that's not damaging. Maybe not to the extent that you're going to get when you go into combat. Then when you go into combat, it's not like what you see in the movies. It's not like you see on television. All right? You turn around to your left, your partner's there. You turn around to your right, he's there. A few seconds later, an explosion goes off, and the guy on your left or the guy on your right, he doesn't exist. Nothing is left but body parts. Arms in one direction, head in another direction. There's nothing that you can pick up. Don't tell me that doesn't scar you. Don't tell me that doesn't affect you when you're trying to get a decent night's sleep. Okay? Maybe you'll eventually come home. All right? Maybe you'll confront your family and there'll be a relative amount of adjustment, but you're still damaged, you're still scarred. Okay? When Barack Obama says no boots on the ground, maybe he's figured this out. Right. But even the guys that are operating the drones, okay, day after day, what they're doing is monitoring the target.
And they're seeing what actually happens at the end of the
Not only they're seeing what happens at the end, David, they're seeing what's going to happen to before. They're focusing in on it. They're adjusting this. They know that they are going to eliminate, push a button and eliminate lives.
But they've totally depersonalized the process. These are kids that played video games. And they've put them in an Air Force base somewhere where they've got this fabulous video game in front of them where they can do these things. And there's Joe, it's all about skin in the game. It's the American public.
Point well made, but I'm not sure if you really can be desensitized from seeing.
There's a difference between a video game. There's a difference between seeing it on television. There's a difference between the films. Okay, when you see it, when you actually know that you are putting.
Behavioral science says otherwise, but
that's changing, John. There's been research on this, and these guys don't feel that comfortable after a while.
Somebody who has skin in the game has a very different response to somebody who doesn't. I think that one of the big problems in our country, if I had my way, I'd bring back the draft.
It's only equitable. It's only fair.
I
mean,
too.
these guys in Afghanistan and Iraq doing 4-5 tours of duty is absolutely insane. It's inhuman. It's unfair. If you're going to carry on a military operation, in only fairness, you bring back the draft, and you don't put into the whole process exemptions and ways that the more influential and the financially affluent can somehow or other evade it, and what happens is the poor in the society become victimized.
The military class in this country is about 1/2 of 1% of the population, and quite frankly, the general public couldn't give a crap as long as it's not anybody in their family who's being directly affected by it.
Well, they should give a crap, and maybe that's why they should bring back the draft.
People are like that. There are very few people in the military.
I've heard about a military draft, the potential of a military draft with alternative means, alternative ways of serving your country.
Oh, I think that's great.
If
I
you're
don't have a
maybe as
problem
an
with that.
alternative to active combat,
I don't
or
have a
even the
problem with
military,
that.
maybe the Peace Corps, maybe a
I don't
Vista
have a
Volunteers
problem
in
with
Service
that.
to America. So everybody does give a couple of years of their life.
Service to their country.
You want to know
It
something?
doesn't have to be military
This is
service.
great. We're talking about the human factor, which is what we should be doing. But you want to know something? I'll take it a little further, and I'll tell you that war, all right, for enlightened countries is no longer an option. It's no longer an alternative. And I'll tell you why. Why? Because over the generations, over the years, all right, humanity has been enlightened. It's like a two-edged sword. They've been enlightened, and that enlightenment, in a way, militarily castrates them. And I'll tell you how. When you go into war, war is an ugly, brutal, chaotic, disgusting, a horrible experience. And this is just it's just inhuman, and there are certain things that occur in war, and we try to check them. Let's limit collateral damage. Let's be careful about assassinations.
Well, just look at the language, collateral damage. You know, killing a family during a wedding by bombing the wrong target.
That's such a nice sound.
Collateral damage.
That doesn't. None of that.
It's
None
like
of that.
you scratch the bumper on your car. You know, it's not really.
Okay. No torture. Okay. What do we mean no torture?
No, that's enhanced interrogation.
Well,
that's not torture.
The fact of the matter is, these are impediments to war. These are built-in impediments that we have put into the process because we have a moral imperative. We say, hey, listen, it's bad, it's so bad, how can we limit it? Well, once you limit it, you frustrate the objective, because the objective is to go in and win it. Okay? That's what Genghis Khan did. You know? Sherman's March to the Sea.
Can I steer us back to the Bernie topic a little bit?
Go.
Let's talk a little bit more about the debate or about Bernie's focus.
Let's go.
Bernie's relating to, as a follow-up to what Joe just said, Bernie said that, perhaps that if we can't take care of veterans coming back from wars, maybe we shouldn't get into them in the first place.
Thank you.
That's one of the best sentences I've heard out of the mouth of a politician in my lifetime.
Well spoken, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right. That's it.
He's full of that kind of wisdom. But, anyway, you were going to go.
So I think the notion about wisdom and how that is an important and integral part of someone serving as a leader of a country, someone serving in any public office, wisdom is so very important.
Diplomacy. The ability to compromise. He's done this. They're all getting on his case because of this whole gun thing. All right?
Yeah.
Well, let's face it. This is a complicated issue. And I think he's handled it.
Any other good answer for it?
And he's handled it.
It can be broken down into a soundbite. You're absolutely right about that.
And when you're dealing in foreign politics, hey, I understand your position. Try to understand my position. What kind of compromise can we come to short of war?
Well, war equals a failure of diplomacy.
That's it.
That's I don't know who said that, but whoever did was pretty wise.
Well, what do you think, David?
Well, I'm very satisfied in the debate overall. I think, with the exception, of course, of Lincoln Chafee, who just really got kind of caught in the in the notion of why he voted the way he did on an issue, instead of just saying, I was wrong, I was against it, I made a mistake, I was wrong, I'm sorry.
But digging the hole deeper is not a good thing.
But that's kind of what Hillary Clinton did back 8 years ago.
The excuse doesn't work.
With her vote on Iraq, instead of just saying I was wrong back then, wrong, I apologize, I wouldn't make the same mistake. She tried to clarify in a way that didn't benefit her or didn't benefit the notion of voting for Iraq.
You know, the ironic piece of the debate is when Bernie Sanders expresses to the American people that that's enough with the emails.
Oh, yeah.
All right?
Point well made. Yep.
Okay, now you got to keep in mind that Bernie Sanders wants to stick with issues. He doesn't want distractions. Okay, so what happens is he tries to put a lid on the distraction, and by putting the lid on the distraction, it becomes a point of interest to the media.
Yeah. It became the focus of a lot of discussion.
Right.
Instead of taking it as it is,
which she did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good debate.
Well, it was refreshing to watch adults having a conversation rather than the two prior debates.
It did seem much more
adult. Like there were any adults.
A lot less bantering and a little bit more focus on issues and a little bit more adult conversation. And with that, we're going to have to break away. It's been Progressive Soup, David Stevenson, Joe Nayola, and John Allen. And thanks for joining us.